from the improvements on the Transpennine route. Now, that's very interesting because Doncaster, Wakefield and Dewsbury all had first-time Conservative MPs elected in 2019. So the cynic might suggest, Gloria, that there could well be a bit of a political motive here as well for Grant Shapps and the Conservatives.
Kevin Larkin, therefore, us in Leeds, it's always brilliant to get your insights from that part of the world. Thank you so much for bringing us up to date on that story, Kevin. And we'll have more on that story after the break as we speak to the Bradford MP who says the government has abandoned its promise to level up the North. Plus, child marriage is 16 too young. MPs are going to vote tomorrow on criminalising marriage under the age of 18. We're speaking to the MP leading that debate. Before that, it's time for your weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hi there. Much colder weather is likely later next week, but for the time being, it's very mild across the UK during the next few days with a lot of cloud cover and rain at times. A keen westerly airflow that's bringing in the cloud and some rain from the Atlantic. A lot of mild air as well, but the most persistent wet weather likely associated with these weather fronts close to the north of Scotland. So for Orkney, for parts of northern mainland Scotland, it is a damp afternoon to come. The rain easing a little later, drying up for the Western Isles. Otherwise, a lot of cloud across the UK. That cloud bringing in some spots of rain and drizzle over western hills of England and Wales. But some brighter interludes towards the east, where it will be very mild. 13 to 14 Celsius generally, but 16 possible northeast England, eastern Scotland, even 17. Small chance of that in eastern Scotland. But it's a windy day as well for northern parts of the UK. That wind increasing over northern hills and especially the Northern Isles on Thursday night into the start of Friday. 60-mile-per-hour gusts for a time in the far north. Stays damp in the north of Scotland, stays cloudy generally elsewhere, and with that breeze, with the cloud, it is a very mild start to Friday with temperatures around 12 or even 13 Celsius in some of the warmer spots. So we start off with that cloud cover, but actually for many places it's looking a little brighter. So for the Midlands, for eastern England, eastern Scotland, a chance of some sunshine coming through, even for northwest England. But generally it's a similar sort of day with that keen gusty wind, the outbreaks of rain for northern Scotland, some light rain and drizzle for western hills and coasts as well, with that thick cloud always coming in on that westerly breeze from the Atlantic. Now, this weather front in the far north will eventually sink south over the weekend. That will introduce brighter skies from the north, but it will also turn the temperatures down a few degrees. So we're looking at those temperatures returning to average by Monday.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday right here on GB News for To The Point.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. As a proud Bradfordian, I know only too well that Bradford is the worst connected city in the country, and it seems that's not going to change anytime soon. Joining me now from Westminster is Judith Cummins, Labour MP for Bradford South. Judith, welcome. Good to see you today. Now, let's be fair to the government. Let's take them at their word. Grant Shapps said it's unparalleled investment, ambitious, and will slash journey times across the north.
Well, it's not unparalleled from where Bradford's standing. In terms of investment for us, we've got absolutely, fundamentally, almost zero. I mean, when we're talking about an upgrade of existing lines, it's not exactly something to jump for joy, is it, Gloria?
And just tell viewers who are not familiar with Bradford's interchange or how easy it is to get from, say, Bradford to Leeds or Bradford to Manchester. Just paint a picture for how difficult it is in Bradford.
Well, the thing is, when we're talking about journey times, it's not just journey time. So if we get improvement to the existing train tracks, that's, you know, a slight step forward, but it's like a toddler step forward, because what we're talking about is capacity as well. So we'll still have those jam-packed trains where there's just not enough people, there's not enough space for the number of people that want to use it. We have 64,000 journeys per day between Bradford and Leeds by car. Now, that's a huge amount, and that's a huge amount because we've got really, really poor connectivity. We've got trains that are slow, we've got trains where you're just packed onto them, and we're between two stations, and both stations go nowhere, so the shunter stations where you come into Bradford and you go out again, it's nowhere where we're not on a direct intercity main line where we're going somewhere and you stop at Bradford.
And one of the reasons that the government say that the plans needed a rethink is because the very ambitious plans would take 20 years to enact, whereas the government's position is that if they make smaller improvements now, at least something will happen. Some improvements will happen sooner.
Yeah, well, I mean, my view, and I think it'll be the view of many people across Bradford, is it's not either or, is it? You can actually do both. You can, you know, the whole idea of the integrated rail plan was to have three separate programmes running in parallel but joined up. So you'd have the Transpennine electrification and the improvements to the track, you'd have Northern Powerhouse Rail, and you'd also have HS2, delivering a real economic boost for the entire region and the entire north. What we've got is kind of a little bit of a patchwork of throwing crumbs from the table to the north, and it's just simply not good enough. Yet again, we don't see the levels of investment that London and the South East get on our transport network. And it's all about, you know, we've heard about levelling up. This is not levelling up. This is kind of a very, very poor man's version of levelling up if I've ever seen it. It's not levelling up at all. It's quite frankly an insult to the people of Bradford.
And give us a sense of what your constituents tell you. What is the biggest complaint? Is it just about trains, or actually a bus is a big issue too? Most people do, in fact, travel by bus.
Well, I'll tell you what it is. It's really about access to opportunity. So what we were hoping for was about, you know, making it easier for people to do business in Bradford, and also making it easier for people, especially future generations going forward, to actually move across the north and join up and connect the great cities of the north, so that we'd have one big northern economy and we could really make a difference in terms of upping the economic footprint of both the north and contribute more to UK PLC. And what we've got now is nothing at all. It's a complete damp squib of an announcement. He was very excitable as the Secretary of State, but his excitement didn't really match the delivery.
And what sort of concerns or response do you think business leaders in your part of the world will have today?
Well, I think they'll be saying it's a missed opportunity. It's a missed opportunity, first and foremost, for the people and businesses of Bradford going forward. And when we're on about long-term plans, you know, that it might take 40 years to deliver a long-term plan, we'd have been willing to wait that long. Because I remember, and you may remember, Gloria, when I first came in and my first PMQs in this place as an MP 6 years ago, it was to David Cameron about this very issue, and he said he was, Northern MPs coming here griping. Well, we were griping then, we're griping now, and it looks like we'll be continue to gripe for a long time yet coming forward.
Just one final question, because I do know you're part of the world. In fact, you're my mum and dad's MP so well. The Grand Central train, so there is now a train in recent years which you can get directly from Bradford through large parts of Yorkshire, which then does go to London. So I suppose my question is, can the market actually help to solve some of these problems, or does it all have to be down to the government?
It is down to the government. It's about government investing in transport for the North. It's as simple as that. It's about government investing in transport for Bradford. It's about government investing in the people and businesses in Bradford and in the North, and they've failed to do that here today.
Judith Cummins, Bradford South MP, thank you very much indeed for your time today. Thank you. Now, you can't legally buy an alcoholic drink or a packet of cigarettes when you're 16, but you can get married. With your parents' consent, child marriage is allowed in the UK, leaving 16 and 17-year-olds vulnerable. The argument goes to arranged marriages against their will. Health Secretary Sajid Javid called it child abuse. Now, MPs are trying to consign it to the history books and raise the minimum age to get married to 18. Pauline Latham is the Conservative MP for Derbyshire. Her bill comes before Parliament tomorrow, and I'm delighted that she joins me now in the studio. Pauline, nice to see you again.
And you.
What's wrong with the current law on being able to get married at 16?
Children can't really object because they're under the parents' guidance and funding, so they can't object to their parents, even if they want to, and it's very difficult for them to say, no, I don't want to get married, I want to continue with my education and training. And after all, they have to stay in education and training until they're 18, so how on earth can you get married, run a home, and do all the things that you have to do when you're married or living with somebody? How can you do that when you're still in education and training at 16?
And Sajid Javid, we quoted his words there, he said it amounted to child abuse.
Yes.
I mean, that sounds strong. What's the justification for using a term like that?
Well, because very often the marriages are people who've been betrothed and married at 16 to somebody who might be 32. And that isn't appropriate. It's a very different thing if 16-year-olds or 17-year-olds fall in love at school and then they can wait till they're 18 to get married. But if it's an arranged marriage supported by the parents, it is child abuse. I mean, if you're 16 and somebody 32 feels as if they're sort of almost going to get their pension, because people don't realise that, 32, it's not very old, as we know, but it is in the eyes of a 16-year-old.
And what do you say to people who would say you're singling out a particular community?
No, we're not. This is a national and international move to fulfil the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals to stop all child marriage around the world under the age of 18. So we're just fulfilling those. We've signed 2 treaties, but we've not fulfilled them. We still allow child marriage, and we shouldn't. So this is what this bill is all about.
How big or widespread is the problem? How many people are we talking about that do get married so young?
Well, legally, with a civil ceremony, not that many. But there are many people who get married with a religious ceremony but never go through the civil side. And the problem with that is it's not recorded, and we don't actually know, but we do know that a lot of people contact the National Abuse Line, and they tell them of the terrible stories of the way they've been treated. I mean, one person that we've heard about, she was taken away to Pakistan at 14 and raped until she was pregnant, and then she could come back. And that's so that they could bring the husband back. And that is completely wrong. How can you rape a 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old? Nobody should be raped, but certainly not a child.
My goodness. Why have you decided to campaign on this issue?
I've been campaigning for about 6 years on this, and I've now managed to persuade the government that it's the right thing to do, because we can't go... I do international development as the main thing I do in Parliament, and we can't go and tell other countries that they should stop child marriage, because they turn around and say, well, why should we listen to you because you do it? And we do. And it's completely wrong.
Do you expect to come across any opposition in Parliament? You seem to be making quite a logical case, a strong argument, but are there people who are hesitant or worried about this change?
One or two have said to me, yes, but if a girl gets pregnant, they ought to be allowed to do the right thing by them and marry. But that was OK when the law came in 1929, but it's a different age, it's a different era now, and if you get pregnant, obviously it's better if the child is brought up in a married situation, but getting married at 16, the statistics show that they don't work. They don't last very often. There's obviously occasional ones that do, and I've had people, public, write to me and say, I got married at 16, 57 years ago, but it was a different world then. We're living in the 21st century where people generally don't get married till much later and generally don't have children till much later. In 1929, there was no birth control. There is now. Nobody needs to get pregnant. It will still happen. And I'm not suggesting we should stop sex, because I don't think we could ever do that. But I think that being married is a very big commitment. It's probably one of the biggest commitments you make in your life. And 16, you're not responsible enough to do it yourself. Your parents have to do it. So why are we allowing parents to make decisions for children, and then it can ruin their lives forever?
And what you're doing tomorrow is bringing forward what's called a private member's bill. So just tell us what the process is tomorrow. Tell us what the chances are of success. What happens tomorrow?
Tomorrow, 9:30, I start, and I speak for as long as I want, really, and then anybody can intervene, and there'll be other people making speeches. For instance, Sarah Champion, who's chairs the International Development Select Committee, she's going to be speaking, and I'm sure there'll be others. And then the Minister replies, and then we might vote on it. We probably won't, I don't think, because it's not that controversial. And I have spoken to all other parties, and they've all said, yes, they support it. There've been odd MPs, I don't mean they're odd MPs, but occasional MPs, yes, who've said that they don't agree with it, but it's one or two. It's not the majority, and it's not political parties.
And when politicians take forward these private members' bills, is this more of an opportunity for the cross-party work? And everyone says they'd like to see more of politicians working together rather than tearing strips out of each other all the time.
We only tear strips out of each other, really, at PMQs. The rest of the time, we do work cross-party. In the Chamber, it's different, but in select committees, we work cross-party. This will be a cross-party initiative. And, you know, I feel it's the right thing for the country to do now, and I hope that Scotland and Ireland will follow suit, because this is only England and Wales. Right. Ireland is already consulting on it, and I think Scotland, because of the Sustainable Development Goals, will have to follow us, which will mean it'll be a whole United Kingdom thing in the end.
And when you try and change or introduce a law through a private member's bill, how long before, realistically, this could become law and nobody under the age of 18 could get married?
Well, I'm hoping, because we have to go through committee stage, where it goes line by line through the bill. Then it'll go to the House of Lords and they'll send it back. But I think that'll be quite quick, because the House of Lords have tried to introduce this twice and failed, but because the government are now supporting it, it will go through. So it'll come back to us, and then we have third reading, and then we get the Queen's assent. So it's really exciting opportunity.
What happens with civil partnerships? Because you can go into a civil partnership at the age of 16.
You can do that at 16, but not gay marriage. So it will include that as well. So everybody will be the same. Everything will be 18.
While I have you, Pauline, then while I have your question, which you all love, the Prime Minister, over the recent events of the last 2 weeks, everyone knows what I'm talking about, the sort of sleaze scandal, he said he drove the car into a ditch over how he dealt with it. It's sort of apologising to you guys, really.
Yes.
So I'm interested, is the car that was metaphorically driven into the ditch, is it a bit scratched, or is it really in need of some repair?
I think it's a bit scratched. I think that because we voted through the new measures yesterday, I think that can be cross-party working, as we've talked about, and I think we should do that so that we can all work together and make things better in Parliament.
Pauline Latham, a real pleasure to talk to you today. Lovely to see you again. Thank you for coming to the studio, and we shall watch what happens tomorrow with interest and hope to talk to you further along the way of the bill. Thank you. Thanks so much. Coming up, the prohibitive cost of fixing cladding and the leaseholders trapped in flats they can't sell or afford to fix. We talked to an MP and his constituent calling on the government to take action. But first, the news with Simon.
Thank you, Gloria. Yes, I am Simon Pusey. Here are your latest headlines. The Transport Secretary has announced his integrated rail plan, which sees £96 billion of investment in the Midlands and the North. Yet he confirmed the HS2 Manchester to Leeds line will be scrapped. Shadow Transport Secretary Jim McMahon described it as a betrayal of trust for the people of the North of England and the Midlands. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, has announced that a public inquiry will be held following the death of Dawn Sturgis, who was poisoned by Novichok in Wiltshire in 2018. She died after the substance was used in an attempt to poison the former Russian spy, Sergei Skripal. A man who killed a university worker and seriously injured 7 others in a knife attack has been sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 21 years. Zephaniah McLeod will initially serve his sentence at a high-security hospital. His stabbing attack occurred in Birmingham city centre in September last year. The Women's Tennis Association says it's even more concerned about a Chinese tennis player following the publication of a letter said to be from her. Peng Shuai hasn't been seen since she accused a senior Chinese government official of sexual assault. In a letter published by Chinese state media, she purportedly says, "I am not missing, nor am I unsafe. I've just been resting at home and everything is fine." And the Prince of Wales and Duchess of Cornwall have travelled to Egypt for the second leg of their Middle East tour. Charles and Camilla have spent the past 2 days touring Jordan, where the Prince praised the country's relationship with the UK in a speech marking the 100th anniversary of the founding of the nation. In Egypt, the visit will include a reception overlooking the pyramids in Giza to celebrate the bond between the two countries. And you are right up to date. I'll be back with more on today's news stories at the top of the hour.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. Now, it's been 4 years since the Grenfell Tower block became an inferno that claimed the lives of 72 people. Dangerous cladding caused the fire to spread out of control. The advice from the fire service to stay put meant very many people failed to get out in time. Successive housing secretaries have failed to resolve the issue of leaseholders trapped in flats with similar cladding. Too expensive for residents to fix, too dangerous to sell. Many of these flats are now essentially worthless and, more importantly, unsafe. Earlier this month, Housing Secretary Michael Gove said he would put a pause on leaseholders paying for repairs and wants to review plans for a loans system. Well, joining me in the studio now is Nadia Isaac and her local MP, Barry Gardner, who are campaigning for change and better protection for leaseholders' rights. Barry, tell us about the issue that you are bringing to our constituency surgery today.
Yes. After Grenfell took place, I held a public meeting in my constituency because we've got a lot of tower blocks. And we had, I think, probably about 1,000 people who came. We invited everybody who was a resident in the tower blocks to come. And we held a meeting with the chief executives of the housing associations that were involved and also with the Borough Commander of Fire. And what we found was that actually this was not just an issue of cladding. There were a huge number of other issues, yes, leaseholder issues, service charge issues, but principally about fire safety issues, fire stopping within the blocks, fire safety doors that didn't work. And that meant that it was suddenly all of these people were saying, thank you for taking notice, but now there's a huge volume of work to do, working with the housing associations, trying to get these problems remediated. And of course, Nadia's block was one of those affected.
Nadia, tell me about the block you live in. Just describe it for us and tell me about the situation you find yourself in.
Well, Gloria, I moved into a new build block in 2016 with the wonderful hopes and aspirations, being on the first-time property owner, under shared ownership because I couldn't afford a full mortgage. The block appeared to be lovely, new, clean, built. However, after Grenfell and with Barry's help, it came to our knowledge that our block actually had all these defects. And not only, as Barry said, with the cladding, the external cladding, but what is not really known is that the internal fire remediation defects are monumental. And basically since 2018, myself, in our Residents Association, of which I'm the chair, we have been speaking to our developers, which is Royal London, and our housing association, which is Network Homes, to try and explain to them, to understand our situation, that we can't move. As you said, my property is valued at zero. Really? My mortgage lender will not allow me to remortgage, to sell, anything like that until we get this certificate to assure us that our houses are safe. So ultimately, all the residents in our resident association, many have had job offers they can't take because they need to move. They've had children, they've had medical issues. Myself, I've had various issues, and I'm stuck. The dream disappeared. And on a mental and a distress level, for all the residents, mentally it's just been horrific.
That was really, really clearly and beautifully, disturbingly explained.
Yes.
So tell me, when did you decide to contact Barry? How did it work?
Well, essentially, as residents in, should I say, affordable housing, we felt that we were getting nowhere. We had no say, we had no voice. No one was taking us seriously, the developer, the housing association. And luckily, should I say, well, it should be the case with everyone, Barry has stepped in and has spearheaded us to help us speak to those in charge to allow us to therefore move forward to get our internal fire remediations starting to be fixed.
Barry, how far have you got? How did you feel when Nadia first explained the situation?
Well, look, I think we've been working together now for 3 years, 3.5.
2018.
2018, yeah. And I think it was March of 2018. And at first we thought, OK, there's a number of issues which should be resolvable within a limited time period. We worked with the developer to say, OK, these are the issues that you need to remediate. Yes, you'll have to decant people from the property during that period in order to get it done. And the trouble was, when they began this work, they found more and more things wrong. There was then the issue of the waking watch.
Yes.
So for 3.5 years, they've had a waking watch. So a waking watch means that somebody 24 hours a day is walking around the building to check that there isn't a fire breaking out somewhere. Now, if you think of the costs of that, many people all around the country are living with waking watches, and it's costing literally tens of thousands.
Who pays for the
Well, that was one of the things that I took up on behalf of our residents, and we got Royal London to agree to pay that for that waking watch. But in other blocks that I'm dealing with in my constituency in Brent North, unfortunately, the developer is not paying for it, and they are having that put on their service charge. It's wicked. It is really wrong. And, you know, these are the things that people just feel trapped. They feel that they are in prison in their own homes. And actually, Nadia's block literally has bars on the outside because the scaffolding's been up there for how long now, Nadia?
The external scaffolding, they only started doing that, well, COVID had an impact on it, but about 1.5 years ago. But the point being is that the internal fire remediations in our new homes, they stripped back the entire corridors to the pipes and took away the walls. And within your own flats, they basically stripped your own flat back to fix the lack of correct insulation. For example, which I've learnt a lot about housing, all your electrical plug sockets in your house should be insulated against a spark.
Right. How do you know whether they are or not?
Well, you don't, because you assume your construction company has done that. And unfortunately, in our case, in our block, they hadn't. So every single plug socket in over 200 flats has to be checked and insulated.
What's extraordinary, Barry, is you'd think... You just assume that there were regulations. If you build something, there are certain standards and regulations that you have to fulfil and that they are checked. And what does happen?
Well, one of the really disturbing things I think that we've uncovered in all of this is that, yes, there is building control, that the building control officer is the person who is supposed to come and inspect and make sure that everything is done properly in accordance with the regulations. And building control always used to be a function of the local authority.
Right.
So the local authority would send somebody in, they would check. A few years ago, the government decided that they were going to allow private building control officers to come in and do these inspections. Now, if you're a developer, if you're a builder, and you want to get on and build the property as quickly and as cheaply as you can, then why are you going to
employ somebody who's going to do really rigorous...
you down,
yeah.
OK? So the competition in building control is about time. It's about, we can get your property built faster because we won't give you any of the hassles. And all of this, instead of thinking, well, the buck must stop with them, no, it doesn't. Mm-hmm. The buck doesn't stop with them. And then people like Nadia think, oh, well, I've got NHBC, I've got my insurance certificate because it's a new build. No, they don't provide any guarantee either. Even though they've checked the property, even though they've identified faults that were there when they looked at it, they've then accepted somebody else's say-so that those faults were remediated. So it goes back, and the only person ultimately in law who is responsible is the developer. Now, in Nadia's case, the developer is still there, and we've been working with the developer, who I have to say, on certain things has
been reasonable
fair,
and
paid
fair.
for the waking watch
Yes.
and so on, and tried to move this on. In other cases, the developer has gone into liquidation, people are left high and dry.
What could the government do to help people in the situation that Nadia finds herself in?
Very simply, the government has said only for those with cladding that they will pay up to £5 billion nationally. The cladding crisis will cost £15 billion nationally. That's just cladding, to remediate the cladding on all the buildings. So the government has said the residents, the leaseholders, the owners of those flats, they should not have to pay for it. But actually, there's no way of doing it unless the government steps in and says, we will get it done, and we will then put a windfall tax on the construction industry to claw back that money. Because they're saying, oh, well, the developer should do it. But as I say, the developer suddenly sometimes doesn't exist.
Because the argument, I guess, is that why should taxpayers have to fund the failures of developers? So you're suggesting a windfall tax on those developers. I'm sure some developers will say, listen, you need housing. You're going to put some of us out of business.
Yes, but the point is this. Those developers are the ones who've made profits on the back of shoddy development, because the construction industry is based on contract, subcontract, sub-subcontract, sub-sub-subcontract. And each one is trying to cut corners in order to make their profit. And unfortunately, the person who's left holding the problem at the end of the day is the person living there.
To interject on that point, what Barry said is in terms of, well, who's going to pay? In our case, and I know because this is evidence, the developers and all the people involved in the building were aware of these fire defects before the property was signed over. They were aware. There was a report written that stated all of these internal fire remediation defects, stating that the building is not safe for occupancy. However, as Barry pointed out, it all got signed off. Yeah. And one of the questions that all the residents and all of us leaseholders, we want to know who is responsible for this. And excuse my putting into a very simple analogy for people like me, is that I think about the fact people say, well, you should have been aware that there were fire defects. And I go, well, if I bought a car and the engine had a fault in it, and 5 years down the line, they find out this fault and they have to recall the engine, do I pay for that fault, or does the actual manufacturer of the car pay for it? I think the manufacturer of the car pays for it.
And when you do a survey, you know, like before you buy somewhere,
yes,
would it not highlight things like this?
No.
They don't take off the plasterboard and look at the sockets.
Yes.
They don't check the piping. They don't actually pull the building apart to find these things. It's only when you do that, or when something exposes it, that actually you realise just how badly these properties have been built in the first place.
And Nadia, so you started off by saying about you fulfil your dream. You're on the property market.
Yes.
You get your first home. This has turned you into a campaigner as well as a very, very angry resident. But yes, did you ever have a campaigning experience before, or has this turned you and taught you how to become a campaigner?
Well, you know, I've always been told that I'm a person who stands up for my rights. I fully believe that we all should be able to voice our opinions and be able to listen to by Barry and by our MPs who should be listening to us. I do, should I say, voice my opinions in other campaigns, but I think it's really brought, sadly, to my attention within I would say, the construction industry, how fraught with issues it is. And when it comes to my personal dream of living in a place, we have a lot of smaller groups that leaseholders across the country. We discuss these issues.
Do you, right across the country? Sometimes people think it's a London thing.
No, across the country. And this was about 3 days ago on social media, and it's a closed group. They did a poll. They said, if you could accept a 10% reduction on your flat of when you bought it, not the current market value, would you take that as a sale? And 70 people said, absolutely, get me out of this nightmare. And I stand up for that. I say that as well, because the block that I live in, I moved into a new block, and I've never seen the sheeting taken off of our corridors, the building sheeting. Our lifts have never had their lift coverings taken off, because it's been a building site since 2016.
Yeah.
Where next for the campaign, Barry? What can you do in Parliament? Your party is not in government. Sure. It's tough.
Look, the government has to realise that people like Nadia are people who've done everything right. They're the people who've worked hard, they've struggled and saved to get on the housing ladder. You know, they've done shared ownership in order to do it because they've really stretched that extra bit because they want to be, you know, participating in society as property owners. What's not to like about what they've done? They've worked hard, they think that they've actually got on the property ladder and they feel really proud of themselves, and then suddenly they're hit by an avalanche and their lives are on hold, and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people all around this country who are in exactly this situation. They can't move.
I think it's a million. I think it's a million leaseholders.
Yes. A million leaseholders.
So it's devastating. The government has to understand that they cannot leave 1 million people in this situation. They have to take action. They have to work with the construction industry and say, you're the guys who created this mess. You're the guys who are going to pay for it. We're going to go in there, get it done, and you will pay. And if they don't do that, they are going to have 1 million people saying, how can you leave our lives in chaos like this?
And Nadia, final, more general point to you. There were people watching who have their own problems in their lives, who will never have thought about contacting their MP.
No.
But that's sort of why we do this item each week on the show.
Yes.
It's, in your words, it's worth it to share the burden, to get some, you know, an advocate. How would you describe why if you've got an issue, get in touch with your MP?
I think it's very important because what I stress to all our residents is that we have the democratic right to vote, and we're very lucky in this country to have that. And then we have somebody like Barry who will speak on our behalf. Unfortunately, sometimes you get ministers of parliament who don't agree, you know, and that is a sad case, and they won't fight for their constituents, even though they're in the terrible situation that we're in. But I would stress, and we do try and tell all the same people, is to write to your MP, write to your local council, see how you can get help, because they don't listen to ordinary people like us.
Well, you've put your case very beautifully and powerfully today, and we thank you for Barry and Nadia for taking part in this constituency surgery. It's been really interesting, and I just really hope you get a resolution. I'm sure everybody watching does. You have been watching The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. The show is back Monday to Thursdays from midday. Tomorrow at midday, Isabel will be with you. Up next, it's On the Money with Liam Halligan. Then between 2 and 3, me and Liam Halligan will be together talking about how do we get more working class kids into top jobs. But for now, I'm going to leave you with your weather forecast and say thank you for joining us.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hi there. Much colder weather is likely later next week, but for the time being, it's very mild across the UK during the next few days with a lot of cloud cover and rain at times. A keen westerly airflow that's bringing in the cloud and some rain from the Atlantic, a lot of mild air as well, but the most persistent wet